is 13 years old. And unfortunately, I find that when I ask my grandson about the 6th of October, he says, yes, the 6th of October city. So you're here talking about the role of education and the role of the media and the importance of introducing the 6th of October war. Yes, unfortunately, I find that my grandsons do not know a lot about the 6th of October war, so we want to raise the awareness of the next generations. Yes, thank you very much, Hero Ahmed Hanafi, one of the heroes of October. Thank you very much.
Sisi witnesses the 34th Armed Forces Cultural Seminar on the occasion of the anniversary of the 6th of October victory.
الحرب حرب أكتوبر ويوم النصر الذي استطاع فيه المصريون أن يبرهنوا على مدى قدرتهم وقوتهم وصلابتهم مستمدين هذا من تاريخهم العريق. صباح الخير يا حكمة.
صباح الخير يا جوهر، كل سنة وانت طيب وكل سنة والشعب المصري العظيم بخير وعزة وانتصار في هذا الصباح المميز.
On this distinguished day, in fact, 48 years of the 6th of October war have passed. This war that has proven to the whole world the ability of the Egyptian to do a courageous action based on the brave decision supported by the bravery of the Egyptian soldiers. This war was not just crossing over to Suez Canal and demolition of Berlin Line, but it helped Egypt cross over from defeat to victory. The 6th of October war symbolized the relentless will of the Egyptians. This will that defeated an army claimed to be an undefeatable army, and it proved that the defeat of 1967 was a defeat because the Egyptian soldier was not given the real opportunity to fight. But the 1973 victory proved that Egyptians were capable of doing it. And as late President Sadat said, that the arm depends on the soldier and the soldier does not depend on the arms and weapons. And the whole Egyptian army has proved this. The victory of October is not just a war through which the Egyptian soldier was able to prove his patience, his determination, and his ability to overcome the challenges. And it is not just a great victory, but it has proved also to what extent all Egyptians are united behind his army and armed forces, inspired by his great history. 48 years and October victory is still taught to others and is still inspiring a lot of people. A lot of people have seen the techniques used during this war. So there was strategic deception, as we learned this sentence from the Egyptian armed forces under the leadership of late President Muhammad Anwar al-Sadat, who is considered to be a hero of peace and war. This war, despite the fact that it was imposed on us, it was able to impose a new status on the ground. This war had a very important role. حكمة. We can see now the arrival of President Sisi to the International Conference Center to attend the 34th Educational Seminar held by the Armed Forces commemorating the 48th anniversary of 1973 victory. And here we are here from El Manara International Center. On these days, the armed forces every year at this time celebrating the 6th of October war
وتتعلم منه العقول
commemorates this memory. It's the greatest victory in our modern history, the war from which the whole world is learning up till now. We raise our heads high because we have the best soldiers in the world who refused the defeat of 1967 and were able to start also a war and that had a great impact and led to the victory of October in 1973. So the will, the belief of the Egyptians who became soldiers and joined the armed forces has a great impact on the victory of October. We cannot forget the role played by the family, the mother and the father, to see this great history that would remember always the role played by the armed forces and what they are doing up till now to confront terrorism so that Egypt would always enjoy safety and security. On this great day, we need to remember over the coming years the spirits of all those martyrs. Greetings and salute to the martyrs. Because of the 1973 war, every scrap of the soil of Sinai was liberated, and we are today witnessing a new crossover for Egypt towards the new modern age with the development achieved in it. Crossing over to live a decent life, crossing over to Sinai through 6 tunnels under Suez Canal for construction and development at this spot dear to our hearts. And here we are witnessing New Sinai after it was liberated 2 times by our great army, once from the enemy and the occupational forces, and the other time from terrorism. And the Sinai is witnessing development in different fields: health, construction, development, agriculture, industry, in addition to the tunnels that have connected the peninsula of Sinai to the delta in Egypt. Sinai was never and will never be separated from Egypt and all the other governorates at this important moment, at the moment of crossover, the new crossing over that is happening with a relentless will and a desire to construction. And the land of peace and development is extended to every spot on the land of Sinai so that the Egyptians would enjoy the decent life they deserve. The peninsula of Sinai was a dream for the political will, and we all had this dream. So what's important is what we are witnessing right now over the past 7 years, as we all have seen in the media, be it the local or the international, that monitors the achievements on the land of the peninsula of Sinai. I think Sinai, we talked about a very important thing, Bahr al-Baqar, drainage, wastewater treatment plant that would provide Sinai and the land of Sinai with water for agriculture. This land upon which the blood of the martyrs of the Egyptian army was shed. 48 years, and we're still remembering the sacrifices of the armed forces, those men of the armed forces who sacrificed themselves and defeated the impossible and gave the best example for bravery. And after all these years, we still have a lot to say and to emphasize for the coming generations. and remind these generations that we are capable of victory, not only in war but also in progress and development. We need to tell this generation that success and defeating any enemy is possible so long as we are one army, one nation. Over 7 years, the hands of construction were extended to every place in Sinai. In particular, we can talk about this great history of Sinai and the great victories made by the Egyptians in Sinai and the Egyptian soldiers, and also the efforts made in defeating terrorism. Sinai, on behalf of the whole world, was fighting terrorism. Yes, and the soldiers in Sinai are still working on this. It's so important to emphasize and say that the armed forces and our great army was able to quickly reorganize itself after the defeat of 1967. And Egypt worked, depending on science, its army to develop Egypt. While we're talking about crossing over to the new republic and the future, let's talk about very important points, since we're talking about this important stop in the history of Egypt, the 1973 war. We can talk also about the fact that President Sisi has given orders to diversify the sources of weapons and arms, and this is very important, providing armaments for all forces, so that the forces of Egypt would be able to confront any atrocities and any aggression on our country, God forbid. And there is also what is taking place in Libya, in Syria, in Iraq, in all the places surrounding Egypt, east, west, north, and south. So this needs a lot to be done. We are an army that does not attack anyone, but tries only to protect itself. As late President Sadat said that all Egyptians should stay reassured that they have a strong army that is a shield and a weapon to defend it. On this great day, we need always to remember, as we mentioned before, and they are still sacrificing up till now. We are still talking about the new generation, maybe this new generation that does not know a lot about the war, and talking about history and the abilities of Egypt and the unity around our political leadership reminds us of the unity of all Egyptians around the political leadership back then and around its army. This is a result of the achievements made by the Egyptians up till now, through the construction and development everywhere in Egypt. Hikmet, you talked about Bahr al-Bakr drainage wastewater treatment plant that will lead to providing Sinai with water and cultivating 500,000 fiddans. Some people might ask why all these projects in Sinai. It's because Sinai is considered to be the heart of our country, and it was filled with the blood of our martyrs. So we need, in honoring those martyrs, to construct and develop Sinai further, and we need to achieve self-sufficiency in the Egyptian market from this land.
قادمة بإذن الله. يعني نعود مرة أخرى كما ذكر
As we mentioned, in the field of joint training, the armed forces is always keen on building the capacities of the soldiers. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the President of the Republic and the highest commander of the armed forces.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most compassionate, many happy returns to you all. Welcome, and let us welcome one of the heroes of October War, Mr. Abderrabbo Nabi Hafiz. Would you please be seated?
بسم الله الرحمن
In the name
الرحيم.
of Allah, the most merciful, the most
يا
compassionate.
أيها الذين آمنوا
He's reciting a verse from the Holy Quran. You, the believers, if you defeat Allah, He will support you and strengthen you.
رئيس عبد الفتاح
Your
السيسي
Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the President of the Republic and the highest commander of the armed forces.
السيدات والسادة
Ladies and gentlemen, 48 years have passed, and the 6th of October day in 1973 is still lightened in the history of national dignity. 48 years have passed, and we are still breathing the breeze of its victory. This war that has always and will always be for us the back of the spirit to the body. The Egyptian was able to turn the dream into a reality, destroying the walls of defeat and frustration, raising the flag of determination and the slogan of victory. On his forefront, you will find glory and pride. Today, we are remembering the events of this great day, to remember together what was achieved by the Egyptian army, its sacrifices, and its achievements. We are holding today the 34th educational seminar commemorating the 48th anniversary of 1973 victory under the title October 73, Crossing Over to the Future. And the best thing to start with is verses from the Holy Quran with reciter Sheikh Ahmed Tamim al-Maraghi.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فبما رحمة من الله لنت لهم ولو كنت فظا غليظ القلب لانفضوا من حولك فاعف عنهم واستغفر لهم وشاورهم في الأمر فإذا عزمت فتوكل على الله إن الله يحب المتوكلين. المتوكلين إن ينصركم الله فلا غالب لكم وإن يخذلكم فمن ذا الذي ينصركم من بعده وعلى الله فليتوكل المؤمنون صدق الله العظيم.
I prefer the world's respect even without compassion. I do not need the compassion of the world without respect. These words did not reflect only the character of late President Muhammad Anwar al-Sadat, but it reflects also a whole nation. And this war proved that Egypt, at the most critical moments of its weakness, can never be subject to others or bow. And at the moment of its strongest strength would never attack others. Egypt could not stop hand folded before the dark image that it has witnessed every day, witnessing its lands and territories enjoyed by the enemy and others. And the Egyptian army would have never accepted that this usurped land would get back without battle, and it would never accept condolences for its martyrs in June 1967 before taking revenge. And replying to this is the belief and the creed of Egypt and the Egyptians and its soldiers, who prefer to die in dignity rather than live. And we watch now this documentary produced by the Moral Affairs.
بحكم موقعها في قلب الدنيا كانت وما زالت مصر مطمعا لكثير من الغزاة.
Due to its location, Egypt has always found a lot of people who want to attack it, but every time you will find that they were defeated, and if you ask what the reason, you will find that it lies in its people who were always united against the enemies. That's why anyone who wanted to take land wanted to divide its people through lies, and all these weapons were used by our enemies to divide us, but the belief of the Egyptian in himself and his country was bigger than all attackers and aggressors, and in every challenge and in every situation he used to create a new history. On the 5th of October 1973, no one in the whole world would have believed that the Egyptians would reach such a point that was called the head of the destructive snake. It was the Egyptian soldier, the only one who was able that he would restore every scrap of his land, and he was able to reach every point of the leadership of the Israeli army in few hours. 1973 October War, the soldier in the battle was not the only hero, but it was the ordinary citizen who played a role as big as the role of the soldiers in the battlefield. The Egyptians supported the great army, although he was under fierce psychological war from the enemies and other countries. They wanted to doubt the ability of the Egyptians to get back to Sinai, emphasizing that Egyptians have no other option but accepting the facts, and they would never be able to cross over to the other bank of the canal. The Egyptian, with the national leadership, were ready with their belief before arms and weapons. I can say that our will today is based on a real strength. And the only thing we need to do is practice this will whenever everything is ready and suitable, and whenever we select this timing. The Egyptians, the nation, and the army proved that nothing is impossible. We achieved the victory, and we restored back the land. Our great people that deprived itself for long years from the necessities of life to provide to his army money and arms to achieve his dignity and to achieve victory for his whole Arab nation. And as Sadat was the hero of the war, he was also the maker of peace. And when asked, what would you like history to say about you? He said,
what would you like people to write about you after you've gone? I should like them to write on my tomb. He has lived for peace, and he has died for principles.
استشهد البطل في المكان ده اللي كان بيحتفل فيه بانتصاره.
Celebrating this victory.
ولمسة وفاء.
And in recognition, Egypt is giving back this favor to him and is putting him with his spouse, Jehannes Sadat, who supported him and supported all Egyptians through her work that's still there amongst us.
واللي كانت شهادتها بتنور الطريق.
And her testimony was preparing the way for the coming generations. October's victory was the greatest memory in the history of Egyptians. I lived with the makers of this victory the best moments of my life. Anwar Sadat did not make this achievement on his own, but the great army of Egypt has inscribed this legend. Mrs. Jehan played a great national role at that time. It's enough that there were a lot of injured soldiers during this war, and she played an important role. She was the mother of the Egyptians at that time. After her death, President Sisi gave her the perfection order. Social justice and life and freedom, these are the demands and requests of the young people of Egypt. They filled Tahrir Square on the 25th of January asking for this, and this was normal to happen in other countries, but was not normal what was done by the other countries and different groups and organizations. They wanted to divide Egypt into 100 parts, and this created a great battle against Egypt, aiming at dividing it and breaking it from inside. When Gamal Hamdan described Egypt, he said that it cannot be divided into two, whatever the pressure is. He had in his mind a lot of great events that the Egyptians have been through over 7,000 years, and despite all these events, it stayed united and not divided. So when a group tried to divide Egypt between who is with us and who are the others, it was so difficult for us to find our people in every house feeling that. And they were all asking, where are you? No one can harm this nation while we are still alive. We as officers in the army cannot live with that when we feel that the whole Egyptian nation is terrified and worried. It would be much better than to die. The Egyptians on the 30th of June went to the streets saying no to a group that founded that Egypt is just a land, a group that wanted to dismantle all the state institutions and harm its national security. When the Egyptians took to the streets on the 30th of June, this group tried as much as we can to threaten and raise doubts about the ability of the people to make a change and impose a reality, either their group or chaos. But the Egyptian citizen had another response. His country never would be hijacked by others, and he went to all the squares of Egypt raising the flag of Egypt. The 30th of June, a revolution that destroyed the plan to destroy the whole region. That's why Egypt was under ferocious plans, and a lot of terrorist attacks were made in Egypt, but the devoted sons of Egypt confronted all that with their sacrifices and beliefs. And this was a message to the whole world that Egypt is protected by the strength of its people, and new Egypt is creating a new history. Egypt that crossed over in October with the belief of righteous people is making a crossing over now towards construction and development. Egypt, the 30th of June, when it decided to change the reality of people, put a clear vision up till 2030. And the objective is that Egypt would be better in all fields of life, economic, social, just rights for a country and a nation that has suffered a lot, and it has full right to achieve its ambitions. And they started raising doubts about all steps made by the state. Why and how are we going to develop the roads network? And they raised doubts about the 1.5 million fidans. They raised doubt about the intentions of every person who wanted to build a country in Egypt. And their dream is for Egypt to fall down, as if they have learned nothing from the lessons of history. Egypt every day is establishing new projects, and this is increasing livelihoods of people. Egypt in 7 years implemented development projects in all fields. And this has a great impact on the lives of people. Poverty and unemployment rates were reduced unprecedentedly. The new republic has worked day and night with performance rates that exceeded expectations. All things and developments prove that Egypt, as it was gifted by its kind people, was gifted by also a national leadership at a difficult moment, a leadership that knows the value of its country and announced since day one that the Egyptians call for good to everyone and they call for peace and good. And it also emphasized that if anyone would think of attacking Egypt, its rights and its security would have an unhappy ending. Egypt closed its doors before every evil is going in its path towards construction and development so that nations all over the world would live in peace. Allah, who has created life in our hearts, has given us the right to protecting this life, and this is the means to peace. Long live all nations of the world, and may they all live in peace. It is the strength in difficulties, and it is the support of weak nations and countries. You should protect it. Even if Egypt is lost, then the whole world would lose its heritage. A nation that respects its past is capable of building its present and capable of planning for its future. And those who realize realities would recognize that this nation has a lot to give. The generation of October that achieved this victory and defeated the defeat played its role and gave the responsibility to a new generation that protected it and vowed to hand over this flag flying high to the new generation. This is the topic of this seminar that sends a message from one generation to another. And we have with us Major General Dr. Samir Farag, one of the heroes of October and the manager of the former director of Morale, Dr. Mufid Shahab, the professor of international law and the minister of the team for defending Taba. Sheikh Saeed Abu Samari, one of the defenders of Sinai, Councillor Mohammed Al-Ghitani, a councillor in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Selim Salman from Roda villages in North Sinai, poet Abdullah Hassan, and from Palestine. We have with us this young poet Maisa Abdel Hadi, and this seminar is moderated by Riham Edib and Muhammad Turk. Your Excellency President Fattah Sisi, the President of the Republic and the highest commander of the armed forces, the great army of Egypt, distinguished guests, many happy returns. Welcome. Greetings with the spirit of victory and the smell of the country. It's the great victory of October. This is a day during which we listen to this great victory from heroes who made it or witnessed and contributed to it. Stories of victory will never come to an end. Whatever stories we tell over history, it always would be there in the history of this country. A great epic and a great stories that would be always be in the history of this country, and afterwards new generations that would come and create a new glory. Generations handing over the great flag to other generations. We start this seminar by welcoming you all. Many happy returns. in a safe country. I will start with Major General Dr. Samir Farag. You are one of the heroes of October victory. October, that was a victory that came out of defeat. It was a great victory after a defeat. How this nation and its armed forces symbolized this meaning. Egypt is celebrating today a memory dear to all of us. This is the victory of 1973 war, the biggest victory achieved in the modern history of Egypt. We always have bad memories about 1967. On the 5th of June 1967, Egypt was attacked by 200 planes from Israel. Afterwards, the Israeli land forces came into Sinai, aiming at reaching Suez Canal. And on the 9th of June 1967, it was a sad day in the history of Egypt. On the 9th of June, the Israeli flag was raised on the eastern bank of the canal, and the Israeli forces destroyed our forces in Sinai. At 5 p.m. late, President Abdel Nasser stepped down from power, but the Egyptians refused this defeat and refused that late President Nasser would step down. On the 1st of July 1967, the Israeli forces moved to occupy Port Fuad city, and in Ras al-Aish there was a brigade, 30 soldiers with RPGs and light arms went in a battle for 6 hours, during which the Israeli enemy lost a lot and came back without achieving its objective. This was the first glimpse of hope for all of us in the battlefield. In the same year, on the 21st of October 1967, the Israeli tank Eilat, the biggest water port, went to Port Said, and it was faced by 2 yachts, and it destroyed it with 100 individuals on it. And now the wrecks of it is in front of Port Said at the bottom of the sea there, and it was followed by a number of battles that paved the way for 1973 victory. General Samir Farag, of course, the preparation for the victory and the war was great. What are the most important characteristics of this phase of preparation for 1973 victory? After the defeat of 1967, the first thing that was done by the armed forces was to reorganize itself. We established the 2nd Field Army, the 3rd Field Army, and for the first time we established the air defense troops. And thus the armed forces prepared a full defense plan for our troops west the canal, so that the Israeli forces won't attack the canal. After finishing all these preparations, we started thinking, how are we going to liberate Sinai? And we have put the plan for liberating Sinai. We had a number of problems. The first was Burleaf Line. This line on the eastern side with a height of 20 meters. We needed to have opened in it so that after we extend the bridges, the tanks, armed vehicles would cross over it to the other side and move through these openings. We came up with an idea, and it was the idea of water hose. An engineer came up with this idea when he was constructing the high dam in Aswan, and this plan was a success. In 4 hours we were able to make all these openings, and then came the biggest problem, and it is going through Burleaf Line, the biggest defensive lines. And imagine you, that was done by the French before the Germans in the Second World War. This line was established by 31 strong points from East Port Said up till Suez. This line had sand barriers, artillery, napalm pipelines, siege 6 sieges. So we developed our plan to cross over in 12 waves using the rubber boats, and each soldier knew what is his mission and what are his arms and where is he going. And every soldier had a vest on him where he had put all his needs. We made also ladders from ropes to climb over this sand line. And at 2 noon on the 6th of October, we started our air attack with 100 planes, and afterwards we extended the brigades, and in 6 hours we crossed over Suez Canal and we crossed the Berlif line. On the 7th of October, we had 200,000 soldiers on the eastern bank of the canal. As the 9th of June was a sad day in the history of Egypt, the 7th of October was a sad day for Israel. Golda Meir, the Prime Minister of Israel, and Moshe Dayan, the Minister of Defense of Israel, announced the defeat of Israel. Golda Meir said, "We want to be able to stop the Egyptians after that." So the United States made the first biggest military bridge, air bridge, to provide arms and weapons to the Israelis in Arish. We need to see what the others said about us. General Shalom, in an interview on BBC, was asked, General Shalom, what was the surprise of October War? Was it that the Egyptians attacked on Forgiveness Religious Day? Was it that they attacked at 2 noon, or that they did it in cooperation with Syria on the same day at the same moment, or because they closed Bab el-Mandab Strait? He said no, nothing of that. The surprise for Israel was the war itself and the Egyptian soldier. The Egyptian soldier I met in 1973. He said the Egyptian soldier I met in 1973 wasn't the Egyptian soldier I met in 1967. And he said in his last book, I'm telling the defense forces of Israel, if you will have a future war with the Egyptians, beware that you are going to meet a new Egyptian soldier you never met before. Thank you. He was talking about the best soldiers and the best army in the whole world. I'll move on to Mr. Mufid Shihab, member of Taba Defense Group. Taba that was given to Egypt after a very important arbitration battle. Dr. Mufid Shihab, why Egypt went to arbitration after signing the peace agreement with Israel? Egypt went to international arbitration to restore Taba because it was not ready to give up any scrap of its land. So, according to the peace agreement signed with Israel, full withdrawal should have been done to the international borders of Egypt on October. But Israel has postponed withdrawal from certain sites, and it tried to change the signs of the borders. Yes, some of the signs of the borders were eroded by weather, but there were other signs that were changed intentionally by Israel so that they can acquire some of the strategic spots. Our international borders from Rafah on the Mediterranean to the north till Al-Aqaba Gulf in South Taba, 91 border signs. Some of these signs are very important, and Israel wanted to change their locations to keep these areas for itself. 4 signs in central Sinai, which we call Ra's al-Naqb, a very important strategic site. The last border sign, sign number 91, which is the point of Taba, changed the location of the four signs, رأس النقب and Taba sign. So we needed negotiations to convince them to withdrawal, and we did a lot, but in vain. So we went to the international arbitration and we insisted on this, and we started a legal, strong, lengthy battle with the National Committee of Taba, the Taba defense team. They were all collecting maps, documents and correspondence about Taba, and we started the negotiations that ended by an arbitration agreement to say that we are going to select 5 arbitrators, 1 Egyptian, 1 Israeli, 3 neutral ones, and to identify also the procedures followed in the arbitration process. The written reports, each team submitted 3 written reports, as well as witnesses from both sides to convince the court, in addition to visiting these places on the borders on part of the court, and then the court adjourned its session for deliberations for 3 weeks, and on a great day, the 29th of September 1988 at 2 noon, exactly like 1973 war, the court came in, and the head of the court announced that the Egyptian sites as identified by Egypt for Ras al-Naqb are the right ones. So Ras al-Naqb is Egyptian, and sign 91 in Taba is the right one. So Taba is all an Egyptian land, and the court said that Israel need to withdraw from these 2 important places, and this is a final ruling by the court, and it is an irrevocable ruling, and a ruling that cannot be challenged. So it is a judicial legal victory that crowns the military victory achieved in October 1973. Dr. Mufid Shahab, what was the impact of this ruling on the Israeli side? Of course, for Israel and for Egypt, it differs according to the purpose of each side. A side that is trying to liberate and restore its land, and another side that was trying to usurp the land of the other country. So of course stances differs accordingly. And I remember 3 stances that I was an eyewitness of. The first was the moment when the president of the court came into the court and announced the ruling. Once he said, the court, with a majority of 4 against 1, the 4 the Egyptian arbitrators and the 3 neutral arbitrators, and this one is of course the Israeli arbitrator. Once he announced this, the Israeli arbitrator, who was Rus Lapidus, said, I object. This is an illegal ruling. The president told her, you accept or not accept, it won't change anything because a ruling was made by a majority. At this time, when she was angry, the Egyptian arbitrator was sitting with a smile on his face. Another stance I proudly remember is that when we were getting out of the courtroom, the Egyptians were glad, speaking and discussing the ruling, and the legal advisor of the Israeli delegate, his name was Rosen Shabbatai, he said, you the Egyptians, we knew that Taba was Egyptian and we know that Ras al-Naqb was Egyptian, but we were not able to recognize that you would convince the court and you would be able to defend it. The third and the last stance was on the 19th of March, after lengthy negotiations to implement the withdrawal. This was that great day, the time when we removed the Israeli flag and raised instead the Egyptian flag. Raising the Egyptian flag for the Egyptians was a source of happiness. And at the same moment, the Israeli flag was taken down. So the Egyptians were shouting happily, and silence and crying on the other side of the Israelis. Thank God. No right is wasted so long as people are defending it, so long as there is determination and preparedness for sacrifices. We pray to Allah that the spirit of October would always be there in our country. May it always bless everything that is taking place in our country now to construct a modern state. Dr. Mufid, very important moments that make us all proud of. Our people in Sinai also played their role. The Bedouins of Sinai were cooperating with the armed forces, the Egyptian army, over years after 1967 during the war, and they have a very long history. Sheikh Suleiman Eid Abu Simari, you were like human radars in Sinai, and you were monitoring and doing surveillance. During the year 1967, when the Egyptian army was coming back from Rafah and Sinai, the army was very exhausted, so we received them and we helped them, and we took them to Port Fuad, as it was the only city that Israel was not able to occupy. So we took them with the support of my father, and we used to take them to Port Fuad during the night. And after we took all the soldiers there, and my mother, my father, my aunts and uncles were all moving with their livestock and their cattle on the same traces of the soldiers, so that the Israelis would not be able to follow them. And after we took the last Egyptian soldier to Port Fuad, the Egyptian army asked us to monitor and survey all the movements of the Israeli forces, and you used to do this day and night. And this was led by the father. He would take these reports and send them to the military intelligence every week in Port Fuad. And we'd provide them with all the information through the wireless machines. And thank God, we were human raiders, and we were better than the satellites and the satellite photos. We used to tell everything that would happen in Sinai to our intelligence services. And after 1973 victory, late President Sadat granted my father the first degree excellence order for his cooperation with the armed forces during that period. I remember that the people of Sinai, in the exhausting war and in 1973, were all supporting the armed forces. We were all cooperating together. And those who saw 1967 war and did not live to see the victory of 1973 died sadly. I would like to say to the President that all the people of Sinai, thank you for the construction and the development you are doing in Sinai. It's a real construction that exceeds our dreams. Thank you, and peace be upon you. October Great Victory is a historical battle. It proved the ability of the armed forces to cross over and to achieve victory, and it proved the greatness of the Egyptians and their full support to the Egyptian army. If there is an armed battle, there was also a battle with pens. We have with us Muhammad Gamal al-Ghitani, son of author and writer Gamal al-Ghitani, who has a lot of important testimonies as a correspondent from the battlefield during the exhausting war and 1973 war. I'm honored to be here with you, and I'm honored that I learned the history of the great army of Egypt and the history of army from writer, fighter, the lover of Egypt, Gamal al-Ghitani, who was a military correspondent in the battlefield between 1968 until 1974. He told us about the achievements there, and he has planted in us all the love of Egypt and the love of the Egyptian army. On his bureau, and in his desk, he had with us some of the bullets and also part of one of the Israeli planes that was destroyed during the war. And when we were children, he used to tell us stories about the battlefield during the exhausting war and the October War, especially when he was working with Mr. Abdou Mubashir, and he kept with him the order of crossing over until he died. One of the stories he told us was what was done by Chief of Staff Mohammed Abdel Wahab for 134 days without giving in, and he became a martyr on the last day. One of the important scenes that shows the greatness of the Egyptian army was when he visited El Firdan, the commanding sites there in the second field army, and he was received by Hafiz Abu Saada, and he was there that there is an Israeli officer, and he asked him, who is this person? He told him, this is Colonel Asaf Yagouri, the commander of the armed vehicles 193. He now became a captive and not a fighter, so he has full rights to enjoy. This is the greatness of the Egyptian army. And he used to summarize it in one word: our blood is in color, the color of the overall of the Egyptian army. And he said that the best scene for him is the flag, the Egyptian flag, when it was raised on the banks of the canal. The love of Mr. Gamal to the Egyptian army is not only because of the battle, but for the important role played by the Egyptian army that he wrote for the coming generations in his book, The Egyptians and the War. And I can sum it up in 3 points. The first point: the Egyptian army is unlike other armies all over the world. It's the oldest military civilized institution in the whole world. It was there when MENA united Egypt. And also this army has never attacked others, but it has always defended civilization in the Nile Valley. The third point is that the civilized achievements in Egypt is based on the Egyptian army. When the Egyptian army is strong, the state of Egypt becomes stronger. Thank you. Being inspired by the spirit of October victory achieved by the Egyptian army and the Egyptians, and the support of all its segments to the armed forces, there are other victories that happen on the ground in Sinai from the Egyptian army in its battle against terrorism, and the people in Sinai are providing support to this. Yasmin is an Egyptian Bedouin girl from Roda village, and we can all remember the terrorist attack in Roda mosque that targeted the worshippers when they were praying. Yasmin and her family has a special experience to share us with. Introduce yourself, Yasmin, and tell us our story. I'm a Bedouin girl from Sinai, a girl like any other ordinary girl. I was brought in a family that loves our country. One day when I was getting back from school with my sister Rania, we were walking down and we were seen by the terrorists. They shot at us. The bullet hit my sister Rania. She fell on the ground and she had hemorrhage in her brain. A difficult feeling to be described to anyone. At that moment I felt a lot of pain to see my sister dying in front of my eyes on the hands of terrorists. For days and months, I never forgot this image. Rania's books were covered with blood. I kept Rania's books with me up till now, and I will show them to my sons and grandsons to tell them about the terrorists and what they did to us and the great pain they caused to us. Days have passed until one day we had the Roda attack on the 24th of November 2017. 11:55 a.m. Terrorists came into our village. They shot at us. They went to a Roda mosque, killed all the worshippers, the elders and the young. And they came into our houses. They killed the people. I hid my eyes with my hands and fell on the ground. And when I woke up, I found blood everywhere in our house. I found people killed. I went to my neighbors and I found them dead. I found my family dead. I found my teachers dead. Death everywhere. Martyrs everywhere in the village. May God protect us all from that. What conscience made them do that and kill worshippers, children and elders? What made them kill my family, my sons, my brothers and sisters? What conscience made you do so? After all that, we were deprived from our dear ones and we lived with our pain. Every day we remember our martyrs. After all that, terrorism was not able to break me. On the contrary, it made me stronger. And on the second year, I decided with science to get my rights back to my family, and I was ranked the first in high school, and my sister also was ranked first in Roda school, and I went to pharmacy faculty and the program of clinical nutrition. And my sister Bosaina went to the Faculty of Engineering, and we will serve after graduation our people in Sinai and the people of Egypt. Hand in hand, we will take our country to peace and safety and security. And Your Excellency the President, we thank you. You honored my mother this year, the year 2021, as the best mother in North Sinai Governorate. I felt that a father is honoring us. I was so happy. I felt proud, and I felt that you are reassuring me, and you are giving me back my happiness that was hijacked by the terrorists. I thank the armed forces and the police for the safety they achieved in Sinai. Thanks to you, the things in Sinai are much better now. We are living there safely. When I see the overall on the land of Sinai, I feel safe and happy. It's a feeling I cannot describe. A very nice feeling. When I used to see the overall, we used to sing for it, saying our army. And I have drawn your overall in my copybooks. And I would always say, I love you, my great army. I love your excellency very much. And I love our army. And I love our police. And I love my country. And may we all live in peace and safety. And may you always be there in our country, and may God protect you, and we may always live happily. May Allah accept all your prayers. What you have been through, not only you, Yasmin, but all the people in your village, is one of very difficult things, but this did not break you down. You went on. You went to the faculty, and you will be graduated as a doctor. Yes, and we will keep serving our country. And I will honor Egypt everywhere. You were able to find hope despite everything you faced. And we are all looking for hope everywhere, in every sector in our lives. Hope is related to the word. The word. Some words revive people and others kill people. Some document. We have with us poet Abdullah Hassan, who wrote words in love of Egypt. I heard it before during the rehearsals. We have with us also Maisa Abdelhadi, a Palestinian poet, a young poet but big one with her words. And she also wrote about the love of Arabs to Egypt and its army. In the name of Allah, October's victory that we are celebrating today is considered to be a link in a series of victories of the Egyptian army. I have learned about from other artists, and I wrote a poem under the title Your Story Egypt. Morning is coming with blessings with us, and fearing our enemies. My father is working and my mother is cooking. And 6 years ago we faced a defeat, but mosques and churches kept saying that we need to get ready, and people in the streets started asking, when are we going to liberate ourselves? The cowards were hiding behind a dam and a line. But by noon I prayed for my country, and I was fasting. But I kept saying we need to be standing up, and we started and orders to start the crossing over were made. See what Egypt needs, and we are ready. And with every scrap of soil of Sinai, we will sacrifice ourselves. We either will get back as martyrs or victorious. The biggest challenge was to cross over Berlif and cross over to bring those who stole my country, and my father was on the other side waiting for me. Once they say the attack should start, the heart started moving. You, my country, should stay reassured. Allah has created me victorious, and may my country be always there. I miss my territories and land. And the planes were flying over, and the national anthem was there, and everyone was saying Allah is the greatest. And then martyrs started moving, and soldiers crossing over, and never say that those who sacrificed their lands have died. No, they are still alive, and the determination destroyed everything, and the history stood still before the miracle Egypt that was punishing the unjust ones. Pray to Allah and pray for those martyrs who sacrificed and whose blood was shed on the land of this soil. When they say the war started, we came from every side. History, come right now and tell me who we are. Those who crossed over look like the ones who sacrificed themselves. We are all Egyptians. When the land had the mountains, our land is measured by men. When mountains were supporting the land, our country was supported by men, and men protect and construct. Allah is the greatest. Don't ever be fearful, my country, that I called loyal, that the last pulse in you is my last pulse. The great country, the glorious one that is proud of your soldiers. This is your story, Egypt, and this is your people. Nice. Yes, this is your story, Egypt. On my way from Palestine to Egypt, once I saw the Egyptian soldier, I swear by God, I felt safe and happy. I'm a Palestinian. I love the Egyptian army, and I'm so proud that in the Egyptian nation we have a great army like the Egyptian army. I will tell you a poem under the title October is dear to our heart. October is dear to our heart as its memory is spread everywhere. The time of heroship and heroism, it's always there. In Sinai there was the meeting, and in Syria there was the relentless will. They have moved everywhere to defeat the enemy, led by Anwar, the hero, with a victory that would be achieved, and soldiers over there who are ready to sacrifice themselves to inscribe this glory in history. The heart of the enemy was moved as the grave of the soldier is being dug, and they were worried with the volume and the size of the attack. They said that we are shocked and worried, and Berlef Line can witness that they are courageous and those are cowards. And you are the army of dedication and loyalty. You raised our heads high and lowered the heads of the enemies by this victory. May you, Egypt, remember the martyrs and those who liberated it. If the enemy wants a war with us, we are able and we are up to him. And during the time of peace, we fight terrorism. and a new hero is defeating this terrorism. A war brings peace and creates a future, a bright future for Egypt. Egypt would always be there during your time, Sisi, and we will never be broken. A president who follows the footsteps of those heroes and soldiers from the dreams and the country of Palestine. A child is extending greetings to you. That's why we remember this memory of sacrifice. October is dear to our hearts. The army of Egypt, million greetings to you all. October victory is dear to our hearts. The Egyptian army is dear to our hearts. The army of Egypt, the shield that protects Egypt, and the sword that cuts the hands of those who think of destabilizing this country. In this seminar, there is a message from one generation to the other. We told you the story of a nation and an army together created a victory and developed through construction. And we will always remember your words, Your Excellency, that the Egyptian can never give up his land and would never forget a revenge and would never accept a defeat. In the name of Allah, most merciful, most compassionate, I will take just 2 or 3 minutes to extend thanks and greetings to you all, and to a commander. I served a lot with him, and maybe a lot of people do not know about him. It is Major General Samir Farag. He was the commander of my brigade. And let me speak, because he never mentioned this in any interview. And this is something I appreciate. We always say that a brigade is the commander. If the commander is great, then this unit or brigade would be great, and vice versa. At that time, I was a lieutenant, and they said that Lieutenant Colonel Samir Farag came for this brigade, and at that time his reputation was excellent. And he came back from UK from the commander's college. And when I went to this academy, the most famous thing that was there was the debate that happened between General Samir Farag and President Sharon after 1973 war. So this was the reputation of Lieutenant Colonel Samir back then. What I learned from him, I learned from him problem solving. In every unit or brigade, there might be problems. He first took me as a surveillance officer, and I found that all the problems in the brigade and in other brigades in the army at that time were solved by him. He was able to come up with solutions to every problem. So I learned that there is no solution, there is no problem without a solution. So I learned that from him. And also, I served with him when he was the Chief of Staff of Group 33. Deep thanks to Your Excellency. Due respect to you.
كانش ممكن ان انا اعدي، ما جاتش فرصه قبل كده ان انا اشوف سيادتك.
I could have never missed this opportunity to talk about that.
اسمح لي يا فندم اقول حاجه. اتفضل.
Would Your Excellency give me the opportunity to say something? I never mentioned that,
حتى لا يقال ان بتبرع.
so that no one say that
النهارده عن هذا الموضوع تاني.
I mean
وسائل الاعلام هتكلمني وانا مش هتكلم تاني.
to talk about that or that I'm flattering Your Excellency. I will talk now once and for all, and I won't talk about this again. When I became the commander of this brigade, you were the lieutenant at that time, and we worked together for a year and a half. And when I left this brigade, I wrote the confidential report. You know that in the armed forces brigade we give excellence to only 4. I gave it to Major Tariq. The only lieutenant who received excellence was Lieutenant Abdel Fattah al-Sisi.
أنا مش بقول النهارده عشان حضرتك موجود.
I'm not saying this today because you're here. You know that when we used to give excellent, we need to give the rationale for this excellent. I would like to remind you, we were at defense spots in Sinai, and I, along with you, would take the jeep and move in the brigade. On a day, there was a sandstorm by night. I don't know whether you remember that or not. During the sandstorm, you would never be able even to see your fingers, and we were on the road moving to Arish. We informed the commander of the brigade, and they sent to us a bulldozer. We had land mines there, so I said, let's wait till the morning. Lieutenant Abdel Fattah al-Sisi said the civilians will cross this road in the morning, and this road should be opened. I know where the landmines are, and I know this road well. He said, I can do it. So I went into the shelter, and Lieutenant Abdel Fattah al-Sisi went to open the road. This showed me that he is a decision maker. He said over the phone to him, prepare the breakfast for the brigade. What is the breakfast? They told him it is beans, cheese, and tea. They told him, no, let us prepare lentils because it is cold and we need to give them a warm meal. The vehicle carrying the water bottles should move. He told them, bring everything. So by 6 a.m. I woke up and asked, where is Lieutenant Abdel Fattah? They told me he is inside. Lieutenant Abdel Fattah Saeed al-Sisi came telling me everything is okay. I opened the road. The soldiers had their breakfast. They went to the water. The soldiers went to their sites. A lieutenant who is still a lieutenant took all these decisions, and this proved to me that he is a decision maker. That's why when I wrote excellent in the report, I wrote he is a decision maker. I wrote this 40 years ago, not knowing that after 40 years you would be the president. I saw this on the day you decided to liberate Egypt from the Muslim Brotherhood, and you took this decision. Allah is my witness, and I'm old, and we all will die, and I'm not flattering you. And God would judge me if I will say anything wrong. We were all together in the military council, and you were the recent and the newest officer when you took this decision to liberate Egypt from the Brotherhood. The history would always remember this. All what you did is something, and liberating Egypt from the Brotherhood is something else. And when you took this decision, I remembered Lieutenant Abdel Fattah al-Sisi when he took this decision, and when he made all these decisions back then. So I'm honored that we were together in the same brigade. No, it was me who was with you in this brigade. You were the commander. It was me who was with you, and I'm honored that I wrote this report 40 years ago. I was not flattering you, but it was the truth. May God support you. What you are doing today is a dream we had. One day I was coming back from my mission from UK and went into Paris, and I saw 6 lanes road. So I dreamt of having such a road in Egypt, and now we have it. Now you did it. That's why I always say Egypt is supported by its leaders. Abdel Nasser was a great leader, Sadat was a great leader, Mubarak was a great leader, and you are a great leader. And we are glad with all this development that is happening in Egypt, and we will work with you. Thank you. And I will always remember you. Thank you, Dr. Mufid. Let me say that this seminar and this dialogue and remembering history gives those who did not hear this and were not there when this happened an idea about this. When General Samir Farag talked about October, he is telling this story to the young soldiers and officers who maybe were not born yet at that time. So we are remembering history and telling facts to tell them the story of Taba, the story of the arbitration, because at that time the Egyptians were waiting to see whether we would be able to restore Taba as the last piece of land that was still in the hands of the Israelis. And it was achieved with will, determination, science, experience that was there. We did not before have this opportunity to thank you and to thank the Egyptian committee that worked back then. Thank you. Due respect and appreciation. I would like to say to our people in Sinai, you've always played a role as a part of the Egyptian nation. You are Egyptians. Before 1967, after 1967, after 1973, and up till now. Maybe the state was not able to do its duty towards you, but we are trying to thank you and to give back your favor. You are part of the people, but what you did at a very critical moment, and a lot of people need to know what is the meaning of living under occupation and providing support threatening their lives and their families, so that Sinai would be restored by Egypt and the Egyptians. Maybe what we are doing right now is a bit late. Maybe we are 30 years late, but thanks God, we will be able to overcome this as if Sinai was already under development over the past 30 years. I will never forget for Yasmin, Dr. Yasmin. We feel pain, and you have seen that not only people in Sinai paid the price of terrorism, but all the state of Egypt, all Egyptians everywhere. You have seen this in your family, but every Egyptian family had a martyr or an injured one. Maybe they were not in Sinai at all. Maybe they were in Upper Egypt or in the Delta or in Cairo, Alexandria. All Egyptian governorates sacrificed soldiers, officers, and up till this moment we are still giving martyrs until we free ourselves totally from terrorism. This is the fate of God, but you need to be reassured about the fate of God. By our hands, Sinai would be much better than before, and it will enjoy safety, security, and stability. And it would be the case all over Egypt. I'm saying this to you and to others. Evil, whatever its ability is, would be able to defeat good. This would never happen. These are the rules of God. Evil is an exception and good is the rule. And the exception can never defeat the rule. And may God support you and all the people of Sinai. And may God enable us to help you with construction and development. Thank you for this great poem that symbolizes the feelings and the emotions. Our daughter from Palestine, we are glad to have you here, and we are honored to listen to your poem. Thank you very much. You don't know that your father, Gamal al-Ghitani, was a dear friend, and I enjoyed very much talking to him because he was a real patriot. We are from the same area. Thank you. Greetings to all the heroes of Egypt on this day for loyalty. Deep thanks to Your Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. Deep thanks to the great army of Egypt. At the end, we would like to say that the best thing about this country is that it is a nation since the dawn of history up till the end of history is there. And even if we'll tell stories, we will still have stories to tell about this nation. And when we sit here next year, we'll find other stories to be told. And the same applies to all the next years till the end of time. Many returns to Egypt. May Egypt always enjoy safety, security, progress, and development.
سيدات والسادة
Ladies and
استمعنا
gentlemen, we've listened to this dialogue between President and Dr. Samir Farag are the values of loyalty that we were brought up to in this national institution. Now we will talk about Field Marshal Mohammad Hussein Tantawi. One of the heroes of October and one of the commanders of the armed forces who served in the Egyptian army over half a century. His military history is full of achievements and heroic acts that would be always there in the memory of this nation. And Egypt would always remember this critical moment of its history when he managed the affairs of this country with wisdom and patience since February 2011 up till June 2012, until he took it to the shore of safety. And the armed forces taught us, ladies and gentlemen, to be more loyal to our commanders after their death than our loyalty to them while they are still alive. In remembering Field Marshal Tantawi, we will watch this documentary. In the life of nations, men who are selected by fate at the time of crises and at important points to carry the great responsibilities. Field Marshal Hussein Tantawi was one of those men. Field Marshal Mohammad Hussein Tantawi was born on the 31st of October 1935 in Cairo. And then he joined the military academy. That was a dream for him since he was just a child. And he was graduated on the 1st of April 1956 to join the infantry forces. And he has assumed a number of posts over half a century. Field Marshal, since joining the military, until he assumed the top posts, would see how noble he was, as well as the richness of his character as a human being. He is a professionally military man who works on developing the army. Look after Egypt. What they are targeting is Egypt. And when on the 25th of January 2011, the Egyptians took the streets and violence started everywhere, the institutions collapsed and the evil people started threatening its safety and its people. At that moment, fate made Field Marshal Hussein Tantawi shoulder this national responsibility and lead the ship amidst all these turbulences, and he did not hesitate to accept this challenge. The armed forces under the leadership of Field Marshal Hussein Tantawi was able to achieve the roadmap despite different obstacles it faced. And when Allah wanted Egypt to cross this danger, it was the moment of giving the gift and this national responsibility to a new generation of commanders. The soldiers of the armed forces felt the value of sacrifice for Egypt in the character of Field Marshal Hussein Tantawi. And Colonel General Abdel Fattah Sisi, the Minister of Defense and Military Production at that time, who succeeded Field Marshal Hussein Tantawi, has expressed respected appreciation to him. This very respectful, loyal, patriotic man. And this is my real conviction, not only from myself, but from all the commanders or close to Field Marshal Hussein Tantawi. They all have this appreciation to him. May God award him for everything he did for the Egyptian army and for Egypt during the past year and a half. And he endured what others could have never endured. Let us extend the thanks and appreciation to him. And this reflects the value of loyalty in the armed forces towards those who gave, endured, and confronted to protect the national security of Egypt and to protect its unity. As trees die standing, and after a path of giving, Field Marshal Hussein Tantawi, the symbol of sacrifice, the chivalry of Egyptian military, dies. Honoring Field Marshal Mohammed Hussein Tantawi and his name, we called Hike Step military base Hussein Tantawi after Field Marshal Mohammed Hussein Tantawi due to his great role in the history of Egypt. Field Marshal Hussein Tantawi is a hero of faith, and he is in fact a path of sacrifice in love of this country. Ladies and gentlemen, after talking about a number of commanders and leaders who had a great impact in the history of Egypt, we are more confident that Allah, glory be to Him, is always providing this country with sons who protect it. And there are other commanders and leaders who were a reason in protecting this country and changing the face of life on the land of Egypt. They made decisions and went down ways that others would never have done, except a man who took out of his body the fear, and he replaced his heart with a heart of steel. And whatever words would be said about him, they would never be able to describe our appreciation to all these commanders and leaders, and we'll leave it to history to talk about them. History, Your Excellency, the President, is more just and more fair. By this, we come to the end of the first part of our seminar, and we will take a break for 30 minutes.